Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risks, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. And I bet you're exposed to investment risk right now. To reduce it, go to myworstinvestmentever.com and download the risk reduction checklist I've made specifically for you based on the lessons learned from all my guests. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from A Stotz Academy, and here with featured guest, Jonaed Iqbal. Jonaed, are you ready to rock?
I'm so ready.
Jonaed and I met through a prior guest, and basically, I just love what you're into. And so I'm so happy to have you on the show. And let me introduce you to the audience. Jonaed Iqbal has worked with over 100 candidates, many of whom have gotten jobs at places like Tesla, Amazon, AT&T, and MetLife, to name a few. Jonaed brings a unique flair to the career consulting world. He is set on shattering the stigma associated with hiring people without college degrees. It's no surprise that he founded nodegree.com, a platform with job listings that don't require college degrees. Jonaed, take a minute and fill any further tidbits about your life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a quick background. I kind of saw that colleges were just getting so expensive. I mean, there was a time in the 90s you could major in music, you could get a corporate job, and you'd be good, and you'd pay very little, right? You hear the stories of people working summer jobs, mowing lawns, and paying tuition. And now it's like you could get a job as a CEO and still struggle to pay your tuition. And the fact is, the world's changing, right? Education's changing. We saw it this year where people were still paying full price tuition for Zoom University. And how much does Zoom cost, right? The 15 that multiply 15, whatever the license is. And I just don't like how they're taking advantage of students, especially when it's so much easier to learn and there's so many ways to learn. And the world is changing and schools just take a long time to change. So my goal is to really assist people and kind of learn about all the different ways that they can earn money.
That's awesome. And, there's so many things that I thought about when I first, heard what you're doing. I thought about the crazy, ridiculous inflation in education prices. And for those people who don't understand it in America, one of the things that I would attribute the inflation to is government pumping money into
100%.
student loans. When the government pumps money in to people's pockets, the demand rises
Yeah.
massively. And therefore, the universities and the colleges know the demand is there and they can raise prices as much as they want. So in fact, it is in some ways a government created
Yeah.
catastrophe.
It
And
definitely
then,
is. They play a big part.
yeah. So, and that, aspect is the same exact thing that I saw happen in the mortgage crisis, where the government they basically pushed out huge amount of funding using the banks to issue the bonds and the mortgages. So to lower income, higher risk people as a political move, which, I'm not against that. It's just that you have to accept that as you go down the risk, there's costs to that. But instead of handling the costs up front, they stuffed it back into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then eventually they blamed the banks for doing it. And eventually the banks did do bad things, but they were fueling this fire, which drove up, brought millions of new buyers into the market and pushed up prices. Simple economics. And here we see it in the education space. And so that's the first thing. And I go back to when I went to Cal State Long Beach. I went to Cal State Long Beach City College first because I couldn't afford Cal State Long Beach, which was $100 a credit.
Oh man, so expensive.
So I was able to pay $40 a credit at Long Beach City College until I got, citizenship or whatever it would be called, residency in California. Yeah. And then I could afford Cal State Long Beach at about $100 a credit. I graduated in 1989, not that long ago.
Yeah.
So anyways, first thing is I really love what you're doing from the perspective of students are getting, ripped off and the government's fueling it. Yeah, number one.
No, 100%.
The second reason why I love what you're doing is that it wouldn't be bad if you're spending a lot of money for an education, that's going to allow you to create a huge amount of income.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore. What they're learning at these schools now, they don't have to, you know, serve the customer the way you and I have to do that, because they know funding's there, money's going to come, students are going to be there. So I'm just going to tell a quick story, and then this is the second reason why I like what you did. The first is that school is so expensive. The second reason is that I have a group of interns, and I've been working with a lot of interns since it's hard for them to get jobs right now. So I've been working with a lot of interns, and I ask them all the same thing. They're all just about to graduate from university, good universities here in Thailand. Ask them the same thing. What one skill do you have that could benefit me or my business? You know, are you good at Facebook ads? Are you good at writing? Are you good at analyzing? Are you good at research? And the fact is, I would say 95% of them have no skill. They have general knowledge and almost no skills. So what you're, bringing pride back to people that may not have a degree, but have a skill is awesome. And that's the second thing that I like about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's all about the skills because I mean, you're in an industry, right, in the US where it's like good luck getting in without a degree. And I'm not against people getting degrees. I'm just against requiring it because there are plenty of some smart people in finance. Like one of the things I really want to push for is if someone can pass the CFA without getting a degree, I would argue that they're smarter than their degree counterparts because there are people who go to school and they can't pass the CFA. So what does that say? Like what's the point of all that school if you can't take the exam, right? And pass it?
Yeah, in fact, that's a great point. I think whether it's employers or institutes like CFA as an example, maybe we're just lazy and we just say,
Yeah.
well, a degree is just kind of a cutoff point, and
Yeah, they don't want to review. They don't want to take the time to invest because to recruit good people, you have to spend time knowing them, right? You have to create a pipeline. You have to create ways of networking. And most employers just want to put an application, put requirements, and just say. And the other thing is they want to be safe. Like, oh, this person went to Harvard. If they do bad, they're like, well, he went to Harvard. I didn't know he was going to be bad. You got to create programs to identify. You got to train people. You got to retain people. It takes work. So
mm.
a lot of employers want to take the easy way out.
So let's just, before we get into the question of the day,
I mean, I'm
for those
waiting for it.
people, for those people that like what you're doing, what's the best way for them to keep in touch with you, follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so the best way, honestly, LinkedIn. That's where I post a lot of my content. So if you search up Jonaed, Jonaed, you'll find me. Follow the podcast. I have a podcast where I interview people without college degrees and have them share their stories. So that's called the No Degree Podcast, and you can find them on nodegree.fm.
Beautiful. Okay, so we'll put all that into the show notes, so you can just click on the show notes to go to any of those locations. And now it's time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one ever goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, tell us a bit about the circumstances leading up to it, and then tell us your story.
So look, I'm gonna counter. I did kind of know it was gonna go bad. I didn't think it was gonna be the worst, but I did go in, right? As much risk as I take, I also know I have an idea of what I'm getting myself into. So let's go into the backstory. I've followed cryptocurrency for a while. I originally bought Bitcoin at $34.50. Um, accidentally, right? A friend who's sort of into shady activities needed some money. He's like, "Hey, I got some Bitcoin." I called my friend. I was like, "Hey, he's selling some Bitcoin. It's like $34, whatever. Let's buy." And we bought 35 coins, so 17 and a half each, right? And that was during the first crash of Bitcoin. Fortunately, I saw the rise and I was like, well, this is going up too fast. It was going up like whatever, $40, $50, $70. Then I was like, all right, I don't want to get too greedy, right? Greed gets people. And at 120, we were trying to figure out how to sell, but that was a time there was a lot of regulation, and there were a few exchanges,
Mm.
and we were trying to get rid of it. So we were trying to sell it for 120, but one exchange needed like a parent utility bill. We're like, oh, we live with our parents. There's no utility bill in our name. And then we went to sell it back to our friend, but he spent money on stuff. He's like, oh, I spent 5,000 at the club. I don't have any money anymore. And then we made an account, and then we made the account like on a Friday. We put the ID. On Monday morning, we saw that we were verified. The price shot up to 260. He's like, should I sell? I said, let's sell. And it crashed 3 hours later. And not because I'm an investment genius, just because I pure luck, right? When you sell at the peak of anything, it's luck, man.
Mm.
Like I'm not gonna lie. And whatever, that my $800 investment turned to 4K. I had to pay some credit card bills. I was like a student, I was a college student, and unfortunately I couldn't reinvest anymore. But that was when I first got into crypto technology. And then around December 2017, it started going through a boom. And I saw it rose a lot from like summer months to December. And like following cryptocurrency, I was like, all right, I can invest a lot. And that time you could buy on credit card, right? So I had decent amount of limits. I had like whatever 20K. And I was like, I'm either gonna become like a millionaire or I'm gonna lose some money. So I ended up doing 20K and it crashed, in like a month or two, right? It like crashed. I had I had several coins. Two of them are basically shit coins. So in December 2018, that was like the time where it was like, there was a time you create an app and you people invest millions of dollars. That was the time you created a coin and you just raised million ICOs, right? You got
Yep.
so much money back then. And you could even have like a copy and pasted white paper with like typos and half whatever put together. And yeah, so I bought two of them were shit coins and I lost in like the portfolio tracker. One was minus 99% and the other one said minus, it rounded to 100, minus 100%. So it was like 5K each in those coins. And, so those were essentially worthless. The other ones went down like minus 90%. And thankfully, one went down only like minus 66%. So I still had a little. And you know what? It was like one of those things where it's like if I invested in the right coins, I would have had like 100% return right now. Like if I just put it in Bitcoin in the regular coin or Ethereum, I would have been up whatever. Because at that price, it would have been around 18 to 20K. Price is 50K, so I would double my money. And it sucks because I was about to pull another move buying 10K Ether on credit, and I would have been up 200%. But I still remember, and that decision held me back for 2 years, right? Because it's one of those things where it's like when I went to quit my job, that 20K, that credit card debt was holding me back. And you pay interest over time. It's also like I instead right now I'm almost done with it. So I would have had like 15 to 20K in savings, which I could have used for something else, which I could have used to invest in crypto today, and I would have been up. So the main thing I really learned from that was only invest what you can really afford to lose, right? I see a lot of people, they make these big moves. And ever since then, it's like, I still invest a little, but I'm like, can I afford to lose this? And that's what really guides it. Even if I know I can hit it big, it's like, all right, I'll put 500 into here because I know I can lose this. Because the other thing is, I quit my job in August 2018 to pursue my business full time. And having that debt just made it harder, right? There were some moves I couldn't make, some courses I couldn't buy, and literally anything is better than 99% loss. I would have been happy with a 50% loss, right? Even a 50% loss I would have still recovered so much quicker from.
I think 100% or 99% loss is a pretty damning.
At that point it's a lesson, it's just a lesson, that's all you
Yeah,
have.
it's a costly lesson. And let's go through this. I want to ask you more questions about the
Yeah.
lesson that you learned, because it's easy to say don't invest what you can't lose. But I'd like to kind of define that a little bit, because somebody, well, I mean, I can lose, and I'm young, or I'm this, or I'm that, or I can lose what's on my credit card, or I can lose what's in my bank, or what does it mean? And for the
So
person out
yeah, no,
there.
I mean, let's define it. I think it's what can you afford to lose and go to sleep at night without worrying, right? Because it's like, let's say you lost a week's paycheck,
Mm,
not a big deal. But
yep.
how long would it take you to recover from that loss? That's really the big thing, right? If it's going to be, for me, it's like, since I quit my job, right? Even if I was working, paying off 20K takes a good amount of time, right? If I had a salary of 20K a month, right? Even let's say it would take 2 months after taxes, let's say, to pay it off if I were cheap with my money. But for me, it's like 20K at that point. Let's say, what was I making? Like 70 to 80K. That's like 25% of my yearly salary. And then what a lot of people don't get is 25% of your gross salary is probably like closer to like 40 to 50% after taxes. So that's like 6 months of income. Now, 6 months of income, it depends on your saving. If you have like 3 to 5 years of expenses saved, losing 6 months sucks, but you can recover from. So I think it's like, how long does it take you to recover from it? Because it depends on your financial habits. If I had kids, that would have been, thankfully,
Hmm.
I was young. So that is a good point that if you're younger, you can take the risk, but also you got to think that I lost out on an investment opportunity the following year and a half. So it's kind of those things that you really have to think about. So I kind of think about your income generating abilities, and that really has a big impact. And your savings that you currently have also has an impact on what you can afford to lose. So I think when you lose money, you have to be able to like kind of live without, and like it didn't happen, like a little dent, right? You
Yep.
can afford like someone pinching you, but you can't afford someone like stabbing you,
Yeah,
right? And then you have to
exactly.
go to the hospital.
It makes me think about, credit cards as an example. Imagine someone that doesn't have a lot of savings. They got a job, so they're making an income, but they don't have a lot of savings, and they have $20,000 credit line. Well, if you're making $200,000 a year, okay, maybe that's not such a
Yeah.
big thing. But if you're making $40,000 a year
Yeah,
and you
that's
got a
everything.
$20,000 credit line, if it's interesting to imagine, let's just do a thought experiment. Imagine
Yeah.
that we could do a survey of everybody who has invested in crypto in the US over the
Yeah.
last, 2 years,
Yeah.
maybe 5 years, let's just say. We could ask everyone, let's just say that's 10 million people. What percent of them use their credit card to, borrow from their
Yeah.
credit card to
I
buy
mean, I
crypto?
wonder how many. Well, it's at least 0.1 for me, right? So you at least have one person right here.
I suspect, the bright, shiny object syndrome of, something going up like that as crypto's
Oh,
been going up is so powerful that I would say I wouldn't be able to guess, I don't know, 5,
yeah. I mean,
10, 20%.
I would say at least 20 have dipped into, because, and if it's even among that, a lot of people have dipped into life savings, because I've read about people who mortgages, right? They took out cash advances and all that.
But
Some people, and again, it's all timing. Some people made out big, and then some people, right, unfortunately killed themselves, right, because they were on the wrong side.
but a listener to this could say, "Oh, Jonaed, you just lost. So, you just sour grapes. I made
Not
money.
necessarily. Yeah.
Look at my friend. He bought a new car." How do we think about it when we're seeing people
So
making money and they do, leverage on their credit card and they paid it
yeah.
off and you see that winner?
Yeah,
But
so
what do people need to know?
survivorship bias. This is something a lot of people don't realize. Like, I'm going to give an extreme example. Let's say 10 people jump off a bridge. One of them survives. Are you going to say, "Hey, look, that one guy survived. It's all good." It's like the rest of them died. And then, that one person goes around and says, "I can teach you how to jump off a bridge.
Well, he
I know
writes a
how."
book. I
Yeah, it's a book.
survived.
How
All
I
the other ones are
survived.
dead. His
Yeah.
book's on the
And
best
then,
selling. I'm a survivor.
yeah. And then they'll tell you all the technique and what they did. But really, it's just they're making stuff up. They just happened to succeed and they got lucky. And the fact is, do you want to be those other nine? Do
Mm,
you want to be? And then the fact is, it's like, instead of jumping off the bridge, just jump off 3 steps, right? You don't do
yeah.
that. So it's like, oh, if you fall, you're okay. You're not injured. You're not that. Don't take those huge leaps. It's just not worth it unless you have a parachute, unless you have a safety net, unless you have all these other things.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I look at kind of how I would summarize, what I took away from your story, the first thing is this idea that the way I've said it now is kind as a financial professional, I've said in the past, I would say crypto is just too risky
Yeah.
for the typical person.
Yeah.
But I've stopped saying that. And I say now, go ahead, buy crypto. But I would consider it between 0 and 3% of your total assets.
Yeah.
And start with that. And then from there, you may decide to get bigger and better. Now, of course, there's some people that are going to spend all their lives trading crypto behind a computer all day
Yeah.
long. I'm not talking to that person, have fun, do
Yeah.
whatever. But for the typical person, I no longer say don't buy it. I would just say, and I would probably say, to be safe, probably just buy Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
if you really wanted to do it another way, you could say buy Bitcoin with 80% of your money. For the other 20%, or let's say 70%, for the other 30%, you split it between the three highest market value coins. So
No,
if it was
that's what I would
Ripple,
say.
yeah, if it was Ripple and it was the highest value, but then it crashed, sell it, when the next one becomes the
Yeah.
higher value.
No, I think that's good. And it's funny. The position that I lost the least on was Ripple. And it's funny, but I did one move, right? So Ripple was it went up again. It was like at 27 cents. It went up to 60 cents. And then Ether is another coin, Ethereum,
Mm.
whatever. And I was talking to my friend. I was like, I'm thinking at that point, I was like, I'm gonna convert everything I have. It was like $1,000. That's my 18 to 20K turned to $1,000. I was like, I'm gonna convert everything to Ripple. And he was like, Ethereum. And he's like, nah, I think Ripple. Next day, they got sued by the SEC, and I lost the 66 cents. And then after that, I was like, screw it. I put everything into Ethereum. That was the smartest move because now Ethereum went up, but stick to the bigger coins and even diversify among the bigger coins. It's like,
Mm.
because regulations really impact the prices, right? If you once it becomes super regulated and it always looks like it's going to go that way, you can easily lose 50% overnight, right?
Yep.
50% is just a normal crypto move.
Yep. So a lot of good lessons here. In fact, I advise a cryptocurrency exchange here in Thailand, and help them to stay on the right side of regulation and all that. And regulation is very tough.
Yeah.
So, all right, based upon what you learned from this story and what you continue to learn, what one action would you recommend our listeners take to avoid suffering the same fate?
Be careful and sleep on it and think about if you lost and it didn't go your way, how would life be? Right? I think you got to think about that because so many times we think about the Lamborghini, we're thinking about we're gonna do this, we think about the positives. How would life be if it didn't go the way? Can you handle a 50% loss? Can you handle a 90% loss? Can you handle a 100% loss? Because 2020 has shown that who knows, right? You've had people who are very successful in certain endeavors and then whole industries wipe out. So it's like you got to think about these things. So think about that. And if you can handle the 50% loss scenario, good. If you can be hurt but be okay, 100% scenario, then okay, go ahead. But you got to think about like that.
And to assist the listeners out there, I'll add two things. First of all, the first thing is that what you're also talking about is the concept of sizing a position.
Yeah.
In the investment world, we call it sizing a position, and just keep the sizing low until you get more experience and all that. Many people jump into things. But the second thing that we know from behavioral finance and just behavioral economics is that write it down. What would
Yeah.
life be like? Let's just take Jonaed's advice. What would life be like if I lost all the money I invested into crypto? Write that down on a blank piece of paper and just write down a few bullets. And if you do that, it will really help you to visualize it. And then it may help you with your sizing decision.
Yeah. And that's what I did a few weeks ago because I was like, I could spend 10K. And I was like, look, if I lost, what's going to happen? And I was like, I can't afford to hold myself back another whatever, X number of months to recover.
Yeah. I think the last thing I would also add is just the fact that for the majority of people in this world, wealth is created through business,
Yeah.
not through the stock market or this type of
Very true.
what I would call, investment, but wealth is created through business. All right, last question. What's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
I think I'm gonna cheat. I have two goals. So the two goals are to grow my podcast listenership base. So I want to get some very interesting guests. Hopefully I want to get some like people. I've had some interesting guests. Like I've had a UFC fighter, uh, Demetrius Johnson. I've had some CEOs. So just to kind of get bigger podcast guests and also increase the traffic to my website because I have a decent amount of content. But I want to produce more content. So rank higher SEO wise and rank higher podcast. That's really the goal for the next 12 months and pay
Beautiful.
off the credit cards that I'm still recovering from,
Exactly.
from the few years ago. But I'm gonna definitely pay that off in the next few months.
So I'd like to reach out to the listeners and ask you, do you know someone who has achieved in their life without a college degree? If you know someone who's impressive and could be a good power of example, why don't you reach out to Jonaed through the show notes or through LinkedIn and introduce that person? And maybe that person could tell a compelling story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it and share it.
Beautiful. All right, listeners, there you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. Remember, to reduce your risk in life. Go to myworstinvestmentever.com right now and download that risk reduction checklist that I made specifically for you, coming from what I've learned from all my guests, and see how you measure up. As we conclude, Jonaed, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. And on behalf of A-Stot's Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Yeah, don't make the same mistake I did, because crypto is hot right now. So be careful.
And I can't summarize better what this podcast is all about. Don't make the same mistake I did. And that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and most importantly, protect our wealth, fellow risk takers. This is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stott, saying, I'll see you on the upside.